Hello and welcome to Module 5. This is a video on pre-flighting. In this video we'll go through what the basics of pre-flighting are and what you need to know about it and how you can use it in correcting your work. So basically the term pre-flight is they're taking it from a pilot airline point of view to where when a pilot, before they take off, they go through a checklist and they check to make sure everything's okay before they take off. So likewise with print projects, you go through a checklist of your graphic files and make sure all your files are in order before you send them to the printer, which is in a way taking off. The purpose of pre-flighting is to catch mistakes before you go to press, before going to pre-press or to press. So pre-press will pre-flight your files very thoroughly. They do it all the time to every piece of art that comes in. They need to make sure that it will go through their processes and come out the right way. So they basically will tear your art apart, digitally. They'll look at all of your strokes and fills and images and the resolution and the color swatches and your color modes and are you using the right spot colors and everything. They run it through a very thorough analysis, and they will create a report to you of things that will need to be fixed. So it's best that if you can run your own pre-flight, then you can save some time and embarrassment and maybe some money too. So, I'm sorry about the quality of this graphic, but some of the most common problems with printing and pre-flighting are the fonts might be missing, low resolution images, that your images are less than the standard of 300 ppi, that you're using RGB images or color swatches, missing bleed. Actually, when I talk to pre-press departments, they say missing bleed is the #1 problem, more than fonts. But it's such a basic thing that designers can sometimes forget about it. Transparency, overprint, corrupt fonts. Transparency is just some overuse of transparency can cause issues in pre-press. But then you can see there's incorrect spot colors, ink coverage. That's where we're talking where you have more than 320% of ink in an area. Incorrectly flattened PDFs, your size of your document is wrong, and so on. So there's a lot to check and a lot that you can fix and make sure it's right before it goes to pre-press. In the pre-press department, they'll use professional software that is designed to help them pre-flight your files. One example is called Flight Check, and it's by Marksware. So it continues on with that whole airplane metaphor. And you can see in this sample screen that there's the settings here they call ground controls, so they stick with that metaphor. And this is just a sample of how they can set up, they'll set up a preset profile to run your artwork through, so they can select what image types are okay, or not okay. And here in this case, it's marking what is not going to be okay. So if they find a PICT file, a JPEG file, a GIF file, and so on, it'll flag those. For the image mode, if they find a duotone or a tritone or a quadtone color mode, if they find index color mode or RGB color mode or lab, it'll flag those, and so on. So the file status, is it missing? So basically they can go through and you can see how detailed it is. This is just for the images tab here, and you can see they can type in a resolution, so they can put in a minimum resolution, maximum resolution for regular images or bitmap images, and so on, to flag errors. And then there's these others. They have a whole nother set for fonts, for trapping, your color swatches, your file types, pages, and so on. So it's very complex and detailed, but they set up the profiles and they know what profile to run when your art comes through. On the next screen, we'll see an example of a detailed report that comes out of there. So after they run your file through that report, it'll show, for instance, here's all the color swatches that are being used in the document. It shows their color builds, their color model. There's the builds there. And then this shows where it's used in the document. Is it used in a stroke, a fill, a gradient, and so on. And then here's the fonts section. You can see there's a red X, and there's some red flags here. There's something wrong with this Bilbo hand fine font. And down below, that is the images. You can see all these are red flagged. So there's something wrong with all of these images. You can come over, it can show what type of image it is. There's JPEGs, Photoshop files, there's a TIFF, a CMYK TIFF. Shows the DPI, which is really the PPI. So that's the resolution, and you can see there's a lot of low resolution images there. And then here's scaling percentages, so they can tell when images have been scaled. And that's not always a problem, but sometimes they like to report that back to the designer to say, look, your image is stretched. If that's okay, then we'll leave it like that, but if you want to change it, you can change it. And then the effect of that stretching and scaling on its resolution here. So you can see this 72 ppi image was scaled 691% on the x-axis, which gives it a resolution of 10 ppi, pretty poor pixelated. Anyways, and then these show, so this is just a detailed report that prepress will get, and they can make it into a more readable report or just identify the pieces that are most important that need to be addressed, namely, this RGB image or the severe stretching and scaling of images and low resolution. InDesign does have its own built-in Preflight functions. So if you go to the window menu and then to the output and then to Preflight, you can observe InDesign's Preflight. And let's go do that right now. I'm going to exit out of this slideshow. I'll hide Acrobat. And on my desktop here, I have a InDesign file. So what InDesign does, I'm sorry, I'm using a little bit of an older version of InDesign, but generally it's in the same location and the principles are the same. Generally, your InDesign is constantly pre-flighting your work as you're working. And there's a notification down at the bottom of your screen to the left where there's a little green button, green dot, and it says no errors. And from there you can access the Preflight panel. You can also access the Preflight panel through the window menu, then to output, and then there's Preflight. So in the Preflight panel, it has it's turned on, and then there's a profile that's set for it. And we can see the profile by going to the flyout menu and looking at the define profiles. And with the basic profile set, I can look over here and see, okay, or images. For text, if there's overset text, it'll flag it, or a missing font. So it's a very basic profile here. There's just those two things, the missing links and missing fonts. So that's why it's saying no errors at this point. And over here you can add a profile, and if you could change different things here to all of your colors, tell it what to flag. So it's similar to the flight check. You're basically telling InDesign to flag images that have a low resolution. If it's below 250 ppi, it'll flag it, and so on. And so we can say save. Okay, let's change it to this new Preflight. It changes down there. Now we have errors. So the red arrow, because it's constantly going to be checking your file while you're working on it. So the errors, it shows them in the Preflight panel. Here's the images and objects. There's 7 errors, and they're all image resolution errors. Let's see if I can make this bigger. So I can click on an image, and then down below it tells you the problem. The effective resolution is 185. And how to fix it. Select it, go to transform, scale. They want you to scale the image to get a correct resolution. And this image here is at 100 ppi. That one's at 26. That must be the background. That was pretty horrible. And so on. So you can see InDesign does a lot of pre-flighting on its own. It starts with a very basic profile of whether it's just missing fonts or images. But if you're working on something, like if you're always working on a business card, you can set it to a business card size, and you can set your parameters on there so that while you're working, any pre-flight errors can come up and you can catch them. But generally, you need to really be checking these areas of your document. So your links, make sure they're not missing, and make sure that you have your images are in the right color modes. So CMYK color mode, not RGB. Make sure your image resolution is high. Make sure your fonts are there. You can set the page size and orientation and so on. And so you just need to keep all of this in mind while you're working on your document, and to pre-flight your own documents before you send them off to press. So I do have a pre-flight checklist that we will practice and go through and examine files. We'll do it routinely through the rest of the quarter, and it becomes, I believe it's part of the final exam. I have you do a pre-flight on a file, because that's pretty important to pre-press and print production, and how you as a designer can help, what you can do actively to help pre-press and help your files get through well. So I'm going to close this now, and I'll go back to the slideshow here. A couple of notes. So InDesign does run Preflight while you work. InDesign also runs Preflight when you package. That's why the arrows will show up. Sometimes you need to manually Preflight to find things like text going into the gutter, text going off the page, maybe in an image somebody's head is cut off in an image, or the image isn't cropped right. And so InDesign can't necessarily find all that stuff, but it's always good to have your own eyes look at it and to visually check the files yourself. Okay, so that's it. You should really take the time to pre-flight and pre-flight your files before you send them to the printer to save yourself some embarrassment or headaches. All right, thanks for reviewing, and I'll see you in class.